Thank you for joining us. This is episode 2 of our autonomous sector mini-series. This episode is about the commercialization of autonomous vehicles in China. With me again is Mark and Atticus. And Mark, I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about the practical issues facing a lot of international businesses coming to China in the autonomous sector. Would you like to expand?
Sure, thanks, Sean. So I think, one of the issues is a lot of the international companies, they focus very much just on the establishment of their entity, and they don't think a bit about, they don't plan enough for the implementation. And I think, one of the issues is people will often say, well, what does the law say? Or, I need to wait till the law says this or allows that. And the problem is in China, the technology is moving much faster than the law. And even traditionally in areas where the technology is not perhaps moving as quickly as in autonomous cars, in China, there's always a lag between what the law says and the practice. And typically the practice becomes law at a certain stage. But if you always wait for the law, you'll be always too late to enter the Chinese market. It'll be a bit like people back in the 90s waiting to buy an apartment in Shanghai because they were waiting for the price to go down. And that never happened. So I think for a lot of the foreign companies, you may need to not rely just on what the printed law is, but talk about what is happening on the ground and where are the opportunities. So I think, why autonomous cars is a bit more complicated than manufacturing widgets is because autonomous cars cut across a bunch of different sectors. And so different ministries and authorities are involved. So, obviously there's an automotive component, but perhaps more sensitively, there's a telco component, cloud-based. And these telco companies are quite sensitive, need operational license. Also, the infrastructure. So, to really roll out, we're going to need smart cities, we're going to need the 5G network. And I think in all that, we can see that China is moving quicker than almost anywhere else, and the scale is just bigger than anywhere else. But in addition, it's not like, despite what the NDRC says that, and the NDRC, just for those who don't know, is the body that coordinates China's industrial policy. They are aware that there's many different laws and they're a bit contradictory, but they've clearly said the laws and regulations need to be adapted or amended to enable autonomous cars rather than, block them. So I think there are still players like cybersecurity, state secrets, which will not easily cede ground. So, one of the areas which we'll talk about in a future episode is about mapping and the restrictions there. So I think, basically a lot will need to change, but a lot is changing. But depending on your business, you just need to make sure that your business will be in the trend which is being opened up, rather than you may be hamstrung by requirements.
Thanks a lot, Mark. And I believe on the screen here, we have some actual projects that are happening right now in China. Is that correct, Atticus?
Yes, indeed. Autonomous driving has been developed quickly in recent years. Since 2017, the government issued the testing regulations. So far, more than 20 cities, local cities, has rolled out their own autonomous driving testing activities, regulations. So far, for example, Baidu has taken the lead in this market and doing a lot of testing activities. And also the company Didi, they have been roll out their own road taxi activities. And also, for example, in Guangzhou, the startup WeRide has already also rolled out their own road taxi. So all those activities that shows that China has been, on the quick track on this development.
Thanks a lot, Atticus. And it's good to see that there are some actual projects being implemented in China, but it's quite a long road to get there. Mark, would you like to explain a little bit of some of the issues that these companies might face when commercializing their project?
Yeah, sure. So I think, look, when we wrote the book, which was about 2 years ago, it kind of, we weren't expecting robo-taxis to be operational in a number of Chinese cities. So probably it's not the challenges, it's probably the challenges become much less over the last 2 years in a time frame which was much quicker than expected. So I think, the infrastructure is always improving. And I think, we can already see with those robo-taxi projects, it actually does work. 5G is being rolled out. Smart city projects are being rolled out. So these things are all prerequisites to an autonomous vehicle ecosystem. The technology continues to improve. Consumer adoption, I don't think there's any cultural bias away from having a robot drive a car. I don't think, I think the consumers here are quite happy to have that. But I think, perhaps the issues, which we'll still talk about on later episodes, will be issues about liability, where, I also don't see that as anything which is going to be a major issue in this jurisdiction. Cybersecurity, which will be an issue to consider. Privacy, again, I don't think it's a big issue. VATS licenses, as we mentioned in the previous webinar, this is something that has to be looked into. So these are some issues for Western companies coming in. If the market they're targeting has the right infrastructure, are they able to get the right VATS licenses? And in privacy and cybersecurity, we are actually in a quite dynamic world where the regulations are changing quite a bit, but I don't think it's really stopping anybody from setting up in China. Question might be whether they have to give access to their technology to any Chinese authorities. And then I think perhaps for foreign companies, the market entry, FDI restrictions are abating, but I think a lot of companies are now partnering with Chinese counterparts. In the past, this was normally because the law required it, but I think increasingly we see in these cutting edge technologies like autonomous vehicles that a lot of companies think I can deal with North America and Europe, but China, it's too big to ignore, but I need a strong partner. So we have 2 projects at the moment in the autonomous space where companies are seeking Chinese partners. In one of them, they're setting up a wholly foreign owned enterprise and then encouraging both private equity and strategics to invest. In the other one, they're looking for a traditional, more traditional joint venture partner. But in both of those, the idea is that this Chinese company will evolve slightly differently from the headquarters. And the exit strategy is potentially an IPO on the new Star Exchange, or backing it into a listed company, or selling to a strategic. So I think that's quite an interesting new way for someone to commercialize. That instead of trying to build a nice little niche business in China, maybe you can build with Chinese capital and Chinese know-how and Chinese distribution channels a much bigger business, and you may not fully control it, but it may be a very valuable business. A bit like Yahoo's biggest asset was its shareholding in Alibaba a number of years ago. So, I think the Chinese market is the reason why foreign companies are looking at China now, not as a production base as much, but more about the market. And I think to make a big splash, be it in technology or be really part of it, you probably do need the right kind of Chinese partner.
Thanks a lot, Mark. And some of the issues that Mark mentioned briefly are covered in other videos, which I will put in the description below. Some of the more general market entry, parting with Chinese parties, these types of issues. This series will focus a little bit more specifically on autonomous, and please feel free to check out the other videos linked below. Thank you so much for watching.